So how to connect with Europe, and this is a number of recommendations, of steps that we need that we can take in Japan in order to get closer to Europe. Doesn't mean that Japan should give up its own identity, should completely comply with what's happening in Europe. But on the other hand, if you want to get closer, it's very difficult to imagine that Europe will start to learn Japanese en masse, for example, just to give an example. First step, English education. The language is perhaps not that important. If for example, in public speaking, some research has been done, and it has been found that when people give a presentation, and they look at how persuasive this person is, then only about 30%, the maximum of 30% of the persuasiveness of this presentation comes from the actual contents of the presentation. So if we draw a parallel there, then the contents of somebody's communication, so the actual capacity to speak the language, is maybe not. It doesn't mean everything, but it's still important. It's basically it's a conditio sine qua non, as they say in Latin. It means it's a minimum requirement. If you don't speak English, you cannot communicate. If you cannot communicate, you cannot make a connection. So English is important. Therefore, we need to improve English education.
But English itself implies culture and like a sensitiveness, a feeling,
Right.
many kinds of surrounding issues are involving. So not only speak English, but study English is actually physically how to communicate
Right.
with foreigners.
Right.
So,
But the other elements of communication that comes more into critical thinking, liberal arts,
exactly.
the
But
steps.
first of all, simply speaking, English, we cannot say English is not important. English is the most important. You should study English, but through studying English, you can get many kind of aspects of,
Right. English itself is not enough. Even though
Exactly.
if we speak English, we still have a lot of the gaps. So if we go back to the previous slide, we look at the gaps here. This is not so much to do with a difference in language. This is very limited. The role is very limited. However, it is the tool of choice. Unfortunately for Japanese, English has become the global language, the lingua franca of the world for every business occasion. If people of different countries get together, then automatically it's assumed that the language of choice will be English. Even if a Japanese and a Chinese businessman come together, I think they will both be reluctant to either engage negotiations in Chinese or in Japanese. The reason is that creates a disadvantage for the person or the persons who need to speak the foreign tongue. So therefore, they're probably more comfortable to speak in English. Well, English is, we cannot get around it, the tool of choice. But does that mean you have to be super fluent? Of course, it will help. But is it absolutely necessary? I know a number of people in Japan who do not speak English very well. They make a lot of mistakes, a lot of grammatical error. They have a limited vocabulary, but their enthusiasm, their eagerness to actually communicate, not necessarily always using the tool of English correctly, or always finding the best vocabulary. But by trying hard and by using other tools like body language, by telling stories, by basically using other techniques, by, for example, reducing the tension by telling a joke. These things are also very important.
This is I so-called English.
Right.
But just body language like a Japanese style, but foreigners never understand.
Right.
Problem is, not only speaking English, but also need to how to get his mind,
Right.
right? How to communicate with his true intention.
Right.
This is difficult.
This is very difficult.
But through language.
So language is like basically it's like in IT, right? You have this the OC layer, where you have the base layer and you have all the layers on top. So you basically at the most fundamental layer you have the binary language. It's very so, but because it's very difficult to program in binary language.
I understand.
We created a layer on top and a layer on top and a layer on top, so to make it easier to actually interact with these machines and to interact with the users.
I tell you, 5 years ago, I attended the most advanced course of English school. Okay, 2 advanced school courses I attended. This is most advanced course. Okay.
Right.
At that time, I can communicate with foreigners, but just only can communicate. But since 5 years later, I discussed or I debate with you for 5 years, completely different compared with 5 years ago. So this is not only English, but English.
Right.
But I don't know what is it. But not you don't need to speak fluently, or
No.
you don't take consider for correct grammar. No, you don't need to. But this is different. It's through English, through language, you can get the feeling of the counterpart. What is his true intention,
Right.
and how to open his mind. Okay, your English skill is not high. They will never open their mind because they're going to speak out English, but the counterpart might be they do not understand what he said, right? So he will not speak out the
Right.
truth. So English is the most important issue. This is what I'm talking about, and connecting everything,
Right. That's indeed connecting everything.
right?
But that means that to have an appreciation of the difference in culture, the difference in history, the difference in how we organize our society. That is also part of English. It's said that actually if people are multilingual and they change their language, so for example, if I speak Dutch versus when I speak English or when I speak Japanese, not only my language changes, but also my personality changes a little bit. That's how big the influence of the language is. So when you change your language, you also change your personality a bit. So you not only adhere to the different rules of grammar and vocabulary, but you also change your rules of culture.
Ohashi mentioned he's a native speaker. Right? Ohashi told me he always changed his not only speaking English. Whenever he's going to start to speak English, he will change his character. Change his character. Okay. When he speaks Japanese, English, different person.
Right.
So this is I don't know how to tell the truth. How to best expression. Like for example, if you go into the English course and most advanced course, they'll teach you the most advanced English textbook and so difficult word and difficult vocabulary and so forth, and they're talking about many issues, but still they never understand who you are. Right? Who you are. Even I attended 6 months in 2 different English company. I joined two different company, but nothing I can get the character of the counterpart, like American person, but he's thinking about, okay, I can study, I get more English vocabularies, and I studied how to speak in English, but that's it. Right. Almost 99% the Japanese company allow them to attend advanced English course and ask them to get a high score of TOEIC. That's all.
Right.